Right folks, this is one of two videos that is going to go along with the fourth topic of Unit 2, which is about ante and postnatal screening. So basically, once a woman is pregnant, the tests that go on before she has her baby to see if there's any issues with the pregnancy or with the baby as it's developing, and also some of the tests, the postnatal screening that goes on after the baby's born. But we're going to go into much more detail about that in the video that actually goes with it. This should be considered a kind of a supplementary video for people specifically who are crashing the course and therefore haven't had the sort of background of National 5 in terms of what we understand about inheritance and genetics. So if you're watching this and you've done National 5 before, you might be thinking, well, maybe I don't need to watch it. I would advise you watch it anyway, but this is really targeted at the people who might be having issues with genetics in general, simply because they haven't been exposed to this part of the course during the National 5 time in fourth year. So we're going to start with the absolute basics and work our way up. I will try and draw some knowledge that you already have from the higher course into what I'm saying, just hopefully to give you a frame of reference and maybe something to work on. But what we should know basically from first and second year is we understand that fertilization occurs when a sperm and an egg fuse together, or certainly the nuclei of the sperm and the egg fuse together to give us a fertilized egg called a zygote. Okay, so what a zygote basically is the combination of the nucleus from the sperm and from the egg. This information clearly is from your dad, this information from your mum, and when they combine together, you then have two sets of chromosomes, and that's the information that goes to make you. So you are a unique combination of your mum's DNA, a bit of your mum's DNA and a bit of your dad's DNA. And when I say a bit there, we can be more specific than that, because the amount of information that is in there, if you remember, is one single set of chromosomes, 23 chromosomes from your dad, and the same 23 chromosomes from your mum as well. Remember that your normal cells have got two sets of chromosomes. We use the word diploid to describe that. This is going back to the start of Unit 1. And we talk about how we have two sets of chromosomes, a set of 23 that we inherited from our mum and a set of 23 that we inherited from our dad during this process. Remember that the production of these two sex cells, or gametes as we call them, in order to make them haploid, which means they have one set of 23 instead of two sets of 46, two sets of 23 making the 46. We call these haploid, and these two cells have come from a process called meiosis, remember. So we start off with a germline stem cell, undergoes meiosis to give us a single sperm cell, actually 4 sperm cells, but only one of them is involved in this particular story. So it's a combination of the information from your dad and from your mum to make the information that makes you. And these are haploid cells, and this would be said to be a diploid cell, right? So what the rule then is, because that's what happens every time fertilization takes place, because we inherit a set of genes from our dad and a set of genes from our mum for the same things, because of course your mum and your dad are presumably both human, so they're both giving the same set of 23 chromosomes. The information on the chromosomes might be different, probably will be different, but it's the same 23 chromosomes. You inherit one set from your mum, one set from your dad, and we combine them together to give us the two sets that we then use or have as the information to allow us to develop into our own unique individual. Okay, so that's what's basically happening there. What we do at National 5 in terms of genetics is we concentrate on one particular characteristic that we're inheriting. So let's take, for example, the characteristic of your handedness, right? So whether you're left-handed or you're right-handed, okay? That's inherited in a certain way, which we'll see in a little minute. But basically, you inherit a gene for handedness from your mum and a gene for handedness from your dad. Now, that could be an issue, because if you inherit if your mum is left-handed, your dad is right-handed, you inherit a left-handed gene from your mum and a right-handed gene from your dad. Does that make you half left-handed, half right-handed? No, it doesn't. And this is the crucial thing about what we learn at National 5 about genetics. When we inherit two different forms of a gene, the vast majority of times one of those genes is what we say is being dominant over the other. So we talk about one of the two forms of the gene. Forms of the gene are called alleles, by the way, as well. But you get a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So we may inherit a dominant allele and a recessive allele. And what we learned at National 5 level was that if that happens, if you inherit a dominant allele from one parent and a recessive allele from the other parent, then it's kind of self-explanatory, but the dominant allele is the one that shows up, right? And if you think about the human population and you see how many people are right-handed compared to how many people are left-handed, then what we might imagine, which is the case, is that right-handedness is dominant over left-handedness, right? Now, we are going to demonstrate that, or I'm going to demonstrate that using my own family, its family tree, to try and show you how left and right-handedness is inherited. I am left-handed, probably you'll know that, but both my parents are right-handed, so I have, my mum is right-handed. Technically, I really hope. And my dad is also right-handed. And I have a sister. So that's my basic family tree. There's me, there's my sister. My sister's right-handed, and I am left-handed. Now, on the face of things, you might not expect that, because both my mum and my dad are right-handed, yet and as you might expect, if my sister is also right-handed, so she resembles both parents. I, on the other hand, am not resembling my two parents in terms of right-handedness and left-handedness. I'm not anyway. And we have to understand why. And understanding the mechanics of why this happens is very crucial to understanding the genetics that we're going to do in this topic at higher level, right? So remember what I said about what we inherit. We inherit two forms of every gene. I mentioned that word before as well, but I'll say it again. Alleles are the forms of a gene. Okay, so you might see that word written in questions, etc. So there's a right-handed allele, there's a left-handed allele. My mum and dad, what we said was that there was a dominant allele which was right-handed and a recessive allele which is left-handed. And what we actually do in that case is we use a big R, if I'm out of the way so you can see, we use a big R to show the dominant gene and a small r to show the recessive gene. So we don't use like R for right and L for left. We use R for right because that's dominant, and then we use the small version of the dominant letter, so small r. And basically then, if you think about it, if you inherit two forms of these genes, there are different possible combinations that we can have, right? So forgetting about my family for a little second, we can have that combination where a person has inherited a right-handed gene from both parents. We could also have where a person inherits a dominant gene from one parent and a recessive gene from the other parent. Or, obviously, I'm quite sure you're a step ahead of me here, you could also inherit a small a recessive gene from both parents, okay? But that is the only three combinations of R that you can have, right? Now, the thing about the fact that right-handed is dominant, clearly that person is going to be right-handed because they've inherited two right-handed genes. This person here has inherited two left-handed genes, so he's going to be left-handed. But what about this person in the middle? They've inherited a dominant gene and a recessive gene, and now that's where dominance becomes important, because dominance means that even if you've only got one big R, only one right-handed gene, it doesn't actually matter what the other gene you inherited was, that person would also be right-handed. Okay, so the only way you can be left-handed is by inheriting a left-handed gene from both parents, which kind of explains why it's less common to be left-handed. So let's go back and use that same logic and apply it to my family tree, because we should be able to work out what everybody is. And basically, we'll start with me, because I'm the easy one. I'm left-handed, and as I said to you, the only possible genes I could have inherited, we call this the genotype, by the way, the genotype. Is a small r from both parents. Now that tells us something, because if my mum and dad produced me as a person with two small r's, that tells you that both my mum and my dad must have a small r. Must have, because that's what's been passed on to make me. Now that then means that we also know their other r, because we know that they're right-handed. So both my mum and my dad must, for their other inherited, and remember these will be inherited from their two parents. So my grandparents provided my mum with, one of them passed on a big R, one of them passed on a small R. It made my mum right-handed. Exactly the same thing happened with my dad, but there was the possibility, of course, of my mum's egg having a small r, my dad's sperm having a small r, and those combining together to make me left-handed. Now my sister's right-handed, that's a bit more expected, but the thing about my sister is we don't necessarily know what the other, we know that she definitely must have inherited a right-handed gene from one of the parents, but the other one, we actually don't know. What you can do, and we actually, well, I don't know if we can do this, but you could use the children of this generation to work out. So if my sister had a child and the child was left-handed, we could use exactly the same logic that we're using with my mum and dad. We would know that my sister must have a small r to pass on so that that child's left-handed. If on the other hand my sister produced a right-handed child, then we still wouldn't really know what that r was. So that is basic genetics at National 5 level, is understanding that we have a dominant form of the gene and a recessive form of the gene, and that they are inherited in that way. We always inherit a gene of for everything from our mum, and a gene for every other thing from our dad, and they combine together. So if you inherit two dominant genes, two dominant alleles, then you'll reflect that dominant characteristic. Now the characteristic we have, so right-handed or left-handed, we also have a word for that as well. We talk about how the letters that you get are your genotype. Being right-handed or being left-handed is called your phenotype. Right, now I'd imagine if these words are new to you, you might want to have a wee look at Bite Size, or I'll post up the notes for inheritance as well on the team. But make sure you're sort of comfortable with the idea of the word alleles. That's the two different forms of the gene. Dominant, recessive, I think it's quite self-explanatory. Genotype is the genes that a person has, the two forms of each gene that they've inherited. The phenotype is the physical characteristics. So being right-handed is a phenotype. Big R is the genotype. So there are other ways that inheritance works which are different from this, but they're new to everybody. So I'm putting this basic up so that everybody can get their head around that, so that when on the next video, when I start to talk about the different ways that inheritance can take place, then it'll make much more sense to you, because I'm going to be able to talk about phenotype, genotype, dominant, recessive, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So make sure you read the notes on this, make sure you watch this video a couple of times so you're comfortable with these terms: alleles, dominant, recessive, phenotype, genotype. And once you feel, right, okay, I know what he's talking about, I get the idea, you inherit one gene from your mum, one gene from your dad, they combine together. Then of course you only pass on one, because it's when you're making your sperm or you're making your eggs, you're under the process of meiosis, means that you only actually pass on one form of the gene to the next generation. So that is the basic mechanics of all genetics, and once you're comfortable with that, we can then proceed to the next video. So I'll post this one just now. I'm just about to record the next video for topic 4, but I'm not expecting you to do any work on that until the tail end of this week anyway. It is only Monday when I'm posting this. Right.